73 countries around the Magic world descended on Rotterdam on Thursday, ready to do battle across multiple formats. Now just 8 remain. Welcome inside headquarters here on our final day of Premier Play in the Magic season, because it is the final day of the World Magic Cup. Rich Hagen, your host, alongside the Pro Tour historian Brian David Marshall and Pro Tour champion. Welcome to the desk to Simon Gertzen of Germany. Great to have you here with us. So much great stuff in store. Simon, what are you looking forward to here on Sunday at the World Magic Cup?
I'm already a big fan of Unified Modern. We see a lot of deck diversity. We see blue-red Kiln Fiend decks. We see Dredge decks. We see Infect decks. We see people that master their specific deck, Goryo's Vengeance, because they've played it for 1 year. That's just amazing stuff.
Yeah. Even merfolk we're going to see on camera this afternoon, BDM. What about you? What are you most looking forward to today?
You know, I'm really torn on this answer, because it really starts at the top of our bracket. That we're going to see this morning, and it's, 2 teams that I'm torn between. Team Italy, trying to go first to first, just a great story, great Magic, but, the scrappy underdog team of Australia, it's hard for me to pick a horse in that race, and I'm really excited to have people play Magic to determine who I'm going to root for the rest of the way through the bracket.
Absolutely. All right, so why don't we take a look at the top 8 bracket for the first time here at the World Magic Cup on Sunday, and we'll walk you through what's going to happen and the order it's going to happen in. Well, Australia and Italy are already in our feature match area. They will start your morning of Magic here from Rotterdam. After that, we will head across to Greece and Ukraine in the bottom half of the bracket. They'll be followed up by Finland against Belarus, and then the bracket will be completed with that top match of Belgium against Panama. But we are going to focus in on our first quarterfinal, that is Australia against Italy. The scrappy Australians, the defending champions Italy. Let's take a look at them. Here comes Team Australia for you. They are led by their captain, David Mines, on the right of your screen. Gary Lau in the front of the other 3 there. He's kind of their secret weapon. They think they revel in the role of underdogs, and they will be underdogs against Team Italy. Here is Team Italy for you. And Andrea Mengucci is the returning, he's the captain this year, returning from the successful World Magic Cup champions of last year. Next to him is Alessandro Casamenti, their secret weapon, if you like. Then it's Mattia Rizzi with his 3 Grand Prix top 8s, and Alessandro Portaro with a Pro Tour top 8 in this modern format. Now, Simon, here's the big one, because 3 players will go up against 3 opponents. This is the matchup. You see the coach there for Australia is Gary Lau. He's not playing, but will be putting his input in, and Andrea Mengucci the same, not with 60 cards in front of him, but more like 180 cards in front of him. Simon, let's walk through the matchups. James Wilkes with Dredge against Mattia Rizzi with Infect. Dredge versus Infect, what do we think the likely outcome here is?
The key for Infect is to get Blighted Agents going. Unblockability is the key, because Dredge has a very easy time providing blockers. So I think Dredge ultimately is favored thanks to cards like Conflagrate and Dark Blast.
And not just like blockers on the ground, right? You get Narcomoebas too, which can get in the way of those Nexi.
Exactly.
Let's look at that matchup graphic once again, if we can. So you've got Mattia Rizzi there with Dredge, James Wilkes rather, with Dredge against Mattia Rizzi with Infect. In the middle seat, it's David Mines with Bant Eldrazi against the Lantern control deck for Italy with Alessandro Portaro. Simon, your thoughts?
I think Lantern Control has to be favored here. Bant Eldrazi is not a deck that's designed to get rid of troublesome non-creature permanents, like Ensnaring Bridge.
Okay, and then once again, if we take a look, let's see what our final matchup is there. That is going to be Ryan Cubitt with blue-red Kiln Fiend against Alessandro Casamenti playing Ad Nauseam, Simon.
That's the closest one for me, because Kiln Fiend is faster than Ad Nauseam, but Ad Nauseam has these effects to just buy more turns. Angel's Grace, maybe Fog effects out of the sideboard, Phyrexian Unlife. I don't really want to commit on that one.
Okay, well, let's get into the decks a little bit. BDM, why don't you walk us through what the Dredge deck is doing?
Who am I to judge Dredge?
Go Go on.
So the Dredge deck's actually an archetype I've liked for a long time. You may have seen earlier versions of it that used something like Vengevine as you know, but this is actually more of a pure Dredge deck, and it's really looking to get cards into its graveyard, like Life from the Loam, Golgari Grave Troll, and the key to pulling it all together is a card like Cathartic Reunion, which is just, feels almost like tailor-made for this deck, because you get to discard your Golgari Grave Trolls as part of paying for the Cathartic Reunion, and then you get to return them to your hand as part of that replacement effect for the card
Huge
draw.
boost.
It's
A
just
huge boost for the Dredge deck from
Simon,
Kaladesh.
it seems, Simon, like every team brought a Dredge deck to this tournament, just about.
Not quite, but it was definitely the breakout deck of the tournament, yes.
Okay, so on the other side of the table, it's Mattia Rizzi with Infect. Let's show his Infect list for you. Simon, what's going on with Infect?
Infect doesn't have a lot of free slots in the main deck. You see almost the same cards all the time. The big question is always, do you play Blossoming Defense? We see 2 here. It seems that it's not going to be a 4-off going forward, but 2 Blossoming Defense and then a few 1-offs. The 1 Distortion Strike could be absolutely crucial when facing Dredge.
All right, so let's get into our middle seat. So seat B, we begin with David Mines. He's playing Bant Eldrazi. So Bant BDM, just for people who are new to coverage, welcome along. That's a color reference.
Sure, that refers to the sort of part of the color palette, green, white, and blue.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And, you know, something that you see, you know, represented very well by something like Noble Hierarch or...
Okay, fair enough. And then Eldrazi, well, that's pretty straightforward. If people have been around Magic, even for a little bit, they know that Eldrazi just means enormous and unfair, Simon.
Yes, and if you draw your Eldrazi Temple, they come out really, really quickly.
Right. And the thing with the Eldrazi BDM, obviously, they are a recent addition to Magic. Modern is not a recent addition. It goes right the way back to 2004, 2005. And still Eldrazi are making an impact in this vast format.
Sure, at the last Modern Pro Tour, we had this one, you know, the Eldrazi, you know, creature type was the most dominant at that Pro Tour. And, you know, that's certainly changed. You know, this is a different color pair than, you know, we saw at that last event, but still cards like Thought-Knot Seer and Reality Smasher are just, if you can get them into play on turn 2, turn 3, which these decks are capable of doing, it's just completely disruptive, and you're just on your back heel for the rest of the match.
Well, why don't we see who that's against? Well, it's going to be Lantern Control. This is Alessandro Portaro for Italy. I would ask you what this does, Simon, but a bit like the card Null Rod, but it doesn't do anything. No, it does nothing.
It's a prison deck. It stops its opponent from doing what they want to do, and you have to know exactly which cards are relevant to breaking up the lock and which aren't. So those are the ones you will take away from the opponent thanks to knowing what they are with Lantern of Insight, and then you have Codex Shredders, Ghoul Callers, Belts, and so on. And the key card that you have to draw against any aggressive deck is Ensnaring Bridge. Otherwise, that just doesn't work.
So just tell people at home what Ensnaring Bridge is and does.
Mm-hmm. You pay 3 mana for an artifact, and then it looks at the number of cards in your hand, and creatures with power higher than the number of cards in your hand cannot attack.
Right, so the key is to get the hand empty as quickly as possible.
Yes, and then there are only 0 power creatures that can still attack you.
Which is a Noble Hierarch.
There is one in the Bant Eldrazi deck, yes.
Okay, all right, so then we go into seat C for you. Australia, it's Ryan Cubitt with blue-red Kiln Fiend, BDM.
Yeah, I mean, this is a deck I was a little surprised to see so much of here at the tournament. This is a deck that goes all in on Kiln Fiend. This is a card. This almost feels like an Infect deck in some ways, where you have these creatures that get this creature gets a bonus every time you play an instant or sorcery, and if you have a way to make it unblockable, if you have a way to, you know, just play a ton of cheap spells on the same turn, you can get it in there. And if some of those cheap spells are Team or Battle Rage, well, then you just trample over and do all sorts of crazy stuff with it.
Yeah, Simon, just give us a rough sense of numbers. The Infect decks are trying to do 10 because it's poison. We're still trying to get to 20 with a Kiln Fiend deck because it's regular damage. But Team of Battle Rage plus a mutagenic growth, we're already in the kind of, 12, 14?
That's easily double digits. And if you have one more cheap instant or sorcery, that can easily be lethal. We saw Monastery Swift Spear deal 1 on turn 1 and 18 on turn 2. in one of our feature matches.
Yes.
So the opponent at that point had a Windswept Heath in play. They couldn't sacrifice it because they were on 1 life.
Yeah. Excited to see Bedlam Reveler getting some action here. This was a card we'd all talked about when it was first released, and this is the kind of deck that it's been waiting for.
Bedlam Reveler and Thing in the Eyes. These cards give this deck a lot more staying power than you would think. And also, this is something that the Infect deck doesn't have access to.
Okay.
You just can't bounce all of Dredge's permanents.
On the other side of this matchup is Ad Nauseam. It's one of my favorite decks in Modern, or just my favorite decks ever. It's going to be played by Alessandro Casamenti. There you see him. So, Ad Nauseam, Simon, what is this deck doing?
It's a combo deck, more of a traditional combo deck, non-creature combo deck. You're trying to get up to 6 mana to cast Angel's Grace and Ad Nauseam, and then because you're staying alive thanks to Angel's Grace's effect, you can draw your whole deck. Then you have 2 possible ways to win the game. One of them is to cast Lightning Storm, discarding all the lands in your hand to deal 20 to the opponent. And the alternative kill is with Laboratory Maniac, which wins you the game if you draw from an empty library.
Now, on the face of it, there's an issue with it getting lots of life taken off it early in the game. But this Angel's Grace is really important, right? Because you just can't lose the game because of it.
You can't lose the game, and if damage would be bringing you to 0 or less, you stay on 1 life.
Can't lose the game. This deck has not lost a match yet in this tournament. This Seat C is undefeated with Ad Nauseam throughout the modern rounds of the World Magic Cup.
I'm sure Italian fans around the world will thank you mightily for that piece of information as I go, don't curse us, please. It is time for the first quarterfinal. It's Australia against the defending champions, Italy, and it's coming your way here on the home of Magic right now.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to coverage of the top 8 here at the World Magic Cup. I'm Gabby Sports, joined by Luis Scott Vargas, and we are heading into quarterfinals 1, and we have an awesome matchup. Luis, do you have any predictions for what you think might happen?
I think Italy is probably slightly ahead, but we'll see how things turn out.
So it's time to head down to the feature match. Our players are ready. Let's get into the quarterfinals. Hello, everybody, and welcome to coverage of the World Magic Cup. I'm Gabby Sparks, joined by Luis Scott Vargas, and here we are in quarterfinals 1. It is time to meet our teams.
David Mines.
Ryan Cuvett.
Gary Lau.
James Wilkes.
Ozzy!
Oi!
Andrea Mengucci, Alessandro Casamenti,
Mattia Rizzi.
Alessandro Portaro.
Team Italy!
And it looks like the Italians are ready to party again. They are trying to run it back from last year. It would be an amazing win here again.
Yeah, Andrea Mengucci is the only person from the team that won last year, but I think the whole country would be very happy if Italy won 2 years in a row.
And he's going to be the captain and the coach through this match. Here we're going to see Ryan Cuvett versus Alessandro Casamenti. And we actually have an update here on the players of Mulligan quite a bit. So Italy and Australia around the world not too happy about this. Italy went down to 5 cards, and they actually bottomed their top card, unfortunately. And then Australia is on 6, but they topped their top card. This is going to be Blue-Red Kiln Fiend versus Ad Nauseam.
These two decks actually don't mulligan all that well, all things considered, because both of the decks are trying to assemble 2 different things. The Kiln Fiend deck wants to assemble a massive spells along with Kiln Fiend or Swift Spear or Thing in the Eyes. So, mulliganing to 6 means they just have fewer spells to work with. The Ad Nauseam doesn't need to assemble that many spells, but it needs to hit Angel's Grace plus Ad Nauseam plus 6 mana.
So Ryan kicking things off here with Serum Visions and Alessandro with a Lotus Bloom. If you're Alessandro, what kind of hand are you looking for if you've gone down to 5? How are you trying to dig yourself out of this?
It definitely involves Lotus Bloom. Ideally, it involves lands. He didn't actually play a land on turn 1. But Lotus Bloom does really help because it is one of your cards. It's a 1 card that produces 3 mana. So by itself, it's not quite going to get there. But Alessandro does have it looks like Pentad Prism in hand. So if he can draw 2 lands, then he might be able to end up assembling enough mana to get Ad Nauseam and Angel's Grace out in the same turn. Unfortunately, the Monastery Swiftspear that Ryan found is not going to give Alessandro that many turns.
Yeah, and Alessandro continues to miss a land drop here. Drew Ad Nauseam for the turn, and Ryan in the previous turn actually scryed 2 to the top with Serum Visions. Another one is the Gitaxian Probe that's also on top. So going to be taking quite a bit of damage here, but also pumping the Monastery Swiftspear in the process.
Yeah, and that is exactly what Ryan needs to do. When you're playing against an opponent who's missing land drops and doesn't even have the full combo, just finishing them off before they can find those things is crucial, especially since this blue-red Kiln Fiend deck is very fast, but doesn't have any main deck disruption. It has no way to stop with the Ad Nauseam combo. So outracing it is the option, but with 2 Lightning Bolts in hand too, I think that Swiftspear is going to be able to take the game.
Sleight of hand coming down for Ryan. Found off of another one of those Gitaxian Probes. He has another one in hand as well, triggering that Monastery Swiftspear. There we see there's another Gitaxian Probe. Oh, a second Swiftspear. And this looks like there might be the nail in the coffin, Luis.
Yeah, I would find it difficult for Ad Nauseam to buy enough time to go off here. One of the ways Ad Nauseam can do that is excess copies of Angel's Grace kind of buy you a turn each, but Alessandro doesn't have any Angel's Graces, so even if he found one and used it to buy a turn, he would still need another one to combo. And he doesn't have any lands. His Lotus doesn't come in for another 2 turns.
It looks like Ryan also found a Temur Battle Rage off of the Gitaxian Probe, so he will be coming in with double strike soon.
Yeah, I have to imagine that if Ryan draws a red source next turn, Lightning Bolt plus Temur Battle Rage does 6, 9, 12 damage. That's pretty close to lethal here. We'll see how much these Swiftspears are hitting for exactly, because one of them got a slightly more prowess triggers than the other.
All right, so 1 counter off of that Bloom, and it looks like Alessandro found another Pact of Negation on top. That's not the card he's looking to draw at this point. Untap from Ryan. And he's drawn a second copy of Bolt. No 2 red mana sources, though.
No, and Sleight of Hand could find one. But either way, Alessandro's just multiple turns away from getting there. I don't see a way out of this. Even if Ryan doesn't end up winning this turn, though I think he might be able to. Bolt, Mutagenic Growth, there's already 2. Yeah, that should be pretty close to enough. Since the Swiftspears are 3 power each, Bolt makes it 9. The Mutagenic Growth will make it 13.
All right, so Bolt to Alessandro's face. And it looks like Ryan is just running through the numbers right now. There is that Mutagenic Growth. Mutagenic Growth pumps, and that'll do it. And that's a very quick game 1 here in favor of Australia. Wow, so that was very fast. That's unfortunate. It's very tough to come back from a mulligan to 5, but they're definitely still very much en route to continue battling here in the quarterfinals. That'll do it for game 1, though. We will be back right after these messages.
Play for your chance to win sweet prizes at the Standard Showdown. Sleeve up your biggest, baddest, most busted deck and throw down at a participating local game store. 4 weeks only, every Saturday from November 26th through December 17th. Find tournaments near you at magic.wizards.com/Standard Showdown. Check out Kaladesh Draft Leagues on Magic Online. Build a deck at your own pace and play at your convenience. Draft anytime, play anytime. For more information, visit mtgo.com.
Everybody, and welcome back to coverage of the World Magic Cup. Gabby Spartz here in the booth with Luis Scott Vargas, and we're going to be moving into Table A here. It's going to be James Wilkes. There you see him. He's going to be playing Dredge versus Mattia Rizzi, who's playing Infect. Now, Luis, I was going to ask you to break this matchup down for us, but let's take a look at and catch up what's going on in this game. It looks like Dredge is kind of off to the races, has been able to get a couple of things already in the graveyard, Faithless Lootings, and has at least been able to trigger one Amalgam. On the other side, it seems like Mattia has at least one Infect creature, 2 Noble Hierarchs. We're not sure about how many pump spells yet.
Yeah, and you notice that Dredge has like their whole graveyard lined up in front. Each Dredge player does this a little differently. So all those cards in that front row are just cards in the Dredge graveyard, which is kind of representing what Dredge has to work with for, I guess, the ease of both players.
All right, so it looks like Blighted Agent coming in. Gets 3 Exalted triggers. This kind of acts as a pump spell on its own. And it looks like James is up to 4 poison counters here.
And Mattia has a Noble Hierarch that isn't summoning 6, so presumably, or at least 1, so presumably if he had pump spells, he would have gone for it here. So James can at least be somewhat happy that he isn't dying immediately.
How do you think this matchup goes for Dredge and Infect?
It really depends on how many Blighted Agents and Distortion Strikes the Infect decks tend to draw, because those are really crucial in getting past all the blockers. Dredge makes Narcomoebas pretty easily and ends up clogging the board with them. Conflagrate and Dark Blast are really important, though. If Dredge can get off a good Conflagrate here, then it's going to be really hard for Infect to win this game. I actually see that Dredge has a Dark Blast, too. So James can Dredge Dark Blast, take out one of the Blighted Agents, but then if he has no other answer, the other Blighted Agent comes for at least 4, putting James to 8 poison, and then is just any pump spell away from winning.
Yeah, it looks like James is opting to Dredge that Golgari Grave Troll. Let's see what he hits off the top. It looks like there's 1 Bloodghast, 2 Bloodghast, 1 Narcomoeba.
No Conflagrate. That's the card he's looking for here.
Oh, there's a Stinkweed Imp hidden underneath there too.
So in order to not exactly lock up victory, but be in a very good position, James needs to find Conflagrate and still have enough red mana to flash it back. So that means flashing back Faithless Looting won't do it. So if James has a Cathartic Reunion or a Faithless Looting in hand, he can go for it.
So it looks like he's going to be taking 2 damage there from that Stomping Ground. And needs an answer to these Blighted Agents. This is going to bring back both Bloodghasts.
Yeah, and James is a solid 2 turns away from killing Mattia, and Mattia also has a bunch of Noble Hierarchs that can start chump blocking.
All right, so it looks like Faithless Looting. First dredging that Grave Troll. So we're going to see another 6 cards.
And I would expect to dredge the Dark Blast second, and then you just leave up mana for Dark Blast. But once Mattia attacks then with 1 Blighted Agent, all the Exalteds trigger, you can Dark Blast it then, but if Mattia has found a pump spell, then you still could easily lose.
If that's the case, then at what point do you want to fire off the Dark Blast?
You still... The problem is because there's 2 Blighted Agents, your inclination should be like, well, if you kill one now, while Mattia can't really have a pump spell, then, you'd be in better shape. But then the other one will attack and get the Exalted triggers. So because of the Noble Hierarch triggers, James is kind of forced to just wait. And then if Mattia has a pump spell, then James just doesn't have an easy way out of it.
No, it looks like James is able to form this army of the damned here, attacking with the Amalgam and the Narcomoeba, but definitely facing down a quick clock from those Infect creatures.
Yeah, and it's really going to be on this draw step. I mean, if Mattia can draw a pump spell, then it looks like he should be in good shape.
Prize Amalgam returning at the end of the turn there for James. And let's see what Mattia can find here off the top. It's a Gaia's Cradle.
Yeah,
Pendelhaven.
I don't think Pendelhaven's quite going to do it. You can protect the Blighted Agent from Dark Blast, but it's just not going to be enough because 4 poison, it'll be 5 poison, -1 from the Dark Blast, 4 poison. Put James to 8 poison, and then, let's see, then you end up Noble Hierarchs chump blocking. If you block the 2 Amalgams, you take 7 damage, and fall to 2. Well, Mattea could have another turn here. The problem is that, actually, looking at that last dredge, Conflagrate's now in the graveyard. So next turn, James is going to be able to Conflagrate before attacks, finish off some Noble Hierarchs, and potentially try and win the game. So Mattea kicked things off with a Pendelhaven here, activating it on one of the Bloody Agents, which will force the Dark Blast right now if James wants to use it.
And it looks like the players are deciding which one is being targeted.
Okay.
It looks like James has said it resolves. Okay. So Blighted Agent coming in, 3 Exalted triggers. And he's just casting Dark Blast to shrink it. Yep, and there we see it.
All right.
And now James is up a game here for Australia once more. Big smiles for James.
I missed on the Conflagrate on the Dredges.
Yeah, he knew how close he was to dying there. Any pump spell, I mean, both players just knew that. So,
Isn't that the case every time you're playing against Infect? You know, you're always one.
well, it always feels like they have it.
It always,
but
it always feels like you're about to die too. Moving back to the table that we started out, this is once again Ryan Cubbett versus Alessandro Casamenti. Australia is mulliganing here. That's blue-red Kiln Fiend is what we're seeing. Versus Ad Nauseam. And moving post-board, Luis, what do you expect happens in this matchup?
So Ad Nauseam actually has a pretty cool sideboard card. It's a Darkness. It's a not a very commonly played card. 1 black mana to prevent all combat damage that would be dealt this turn.
Mm-hmm.
It's essentially Fog, and it can prevent a big Teamer Battle Raged Kiln Fiend or Monastery Swiftspear from killing the Ad Nauseam deck. There's also potentially Slaughter Pact and Duress or other options out of the Ad Nauseam deck. So Ad Nauseam gets a few more ways to kind of slow down the game and prevent itself from dying. On the other hand, the Kiln Fiend deck gets some actual disruption, Spell Pierce, Dispel, potentially Surgical Extraction, depending on how they think the matchup is going to go. But Spell Pierce and Dispel are both effective answers to the Ad Nauseam combo.
Alessandro kicking things off here with a sleight of hand. And an update from our middle match. So this is Bant Eldrazi versus Lantern Control. That's Australia versus Italy. And there is no match result yet, but the Lantern Control lock is online, is what we hear.
Yeah, I can tell you looking at our side monitor there, there's a million permanents in play, one of which is an Ensnaring Bridge, which is not good news for Bant Eldrazi.
Yeah, and that's how Lantern Control eventually chokes you out of the game, just makes it impossible for you to actually find any action spells, and you can't possibly win. Lotus Bloom for Alessandro and a Monastery Swiftspear for Ryan. Let's see. It looks like he has a Kiln Fiend that he can get down on turn 2 as well.
And with a hand of Manamorphose and Gitaxian Probe, both of those are free spells. Having a Kiln Fiend and a Swiftspear in play sets Ryan up for a potential turn 3 kill against a deck which is can't really go off on turn 3.
How quickly do you think blue-red Kiln Fiend goldfishes? How fast is this deck?
We did see a turn 2 kill yesterday.
We did see it.
I would say that's slightly faster than normal. My guess is it's around turn 3.5, which what I mean by that is it'll kill on turn 2, rarely turn 3, sometimes turn 4 a good amount of the time, and then past that, a decent amount of the time, averaging around turn 3.5. So if your opponent doesn't kill your Kiln Fiends, then almost any game where you play a turn 2 Kiln Fiend and untap, you have a solid chance of winning the game that on turn 3.
Yeah, and the game that we were bringing you updates on has come to a conclusion. Alessandro Portara is up a game there for Italy.
And that seat is, I think, Italy's best matchup in this match. If if the Lantern deck ends up losing, that's going to be a difficult match for Italy to win.
Interesting card coming down here for Alessandro. It's Phyrexian Unlife. So, Luis, can you break down the interaction of Unlife and how this is going to interact with a blue-red Kiln Fiend deck?
So the reason the Unlife's in the deck is because it does combo with Ad Nauseam, much like Angel's Grace. The interesting part about Phyrexian Unlife is that, so the turn if you take a bunch of damage and go down to less than 0 in one hit, like for example a combat involving a giant Kiln Fiend, you can just like let's say Ryan deals 27 damage. That'll just put Alessandro to -9, but it won't start accumulating infect damage. You only start accumulating infect damage once you're already at 0 or less life. So Ryan basically can't kill Alessandro in one shot here, no matter how big the Kiln Fiend is. Even if it did 100 damage, it would put Alessandro to deeply negative life. But the Phyrexian Unlife Infect clause doesn't like turn on until you have 0 or less life. So it's a very odd card, but it works well in this Ad Nauseam deck. And actually, the Italians are playing 4 Phyrexian Unlife and 4 Angel's Grace, so they're leaning very hard on Unlife.
And here with the Gataxian Probe, Ryan is able to take a look at Alexandra's hand. He's drawn a mountain off the top.
So with Manamorphose, Bolt, Probe, that already makes Kiln Fiend a 10, Swiss Spear a 4. That's 17 damage without drawing a spell off Manamorphose. So this could have been a turn 3 kill if not for that Phyrexian Unlife, if Ryan found pretty much any spell.
And there you see the Manamorphose looking to be cast here as well. So Manamorphose triggers the Swift Spear and the Kiln Fiend. It looks like you found another Kiln Fiend off the top.
Yeah, not the one in the red card he was looking for. Actually, one good thing that the chat brought up is that Double Strike actually can help in this regard.
How is that?
If there's Teemo Batter Rage involved, then the first hit from Kiln Fiend could drop Alessandro to negatives. The second hit would then deal Infect
There
damage.
you go.
So that's relevant, not coming up this turn, but it could happen here. And
It certainly might during the matchup.
Oh, for sure. And we might actually see, again, this is 10 damage off Kiln Fiend, 4 damage off Swift Spear, 3 damage off Lightning Bolt. So I think, if this is all what's happening, that could drop Alessandro to 1, which means that we're next turn, the Unlife buys him an additional turn.
Yep. Phyrexian Unlife doing double duty here, it seems. And against a deck like Ad Nauseam, Luis, how punishing is that?
With that Bloom's coming off to spend here, if Alessandro can find an Ad Nauseam, he will win the game. That is what he's short right now. He's gonna have basically 2 draw steps to find it, and no scries right now, no Serum Visions, no Sleight of Hands. It's basically going to be if the top card of Alessandro's deck is an Ad Nauseam, then he's going to win unless Ryan draws some form of disruption or Lightning Bolt, because Lightning Bolt also does it here because that would put Alessandro to negatives and would allow for the Infect kill to happen this turn.
And we see a swing and a miss are from Duress, just a thing in the ice in Ryan's hand. He's drawn a Mutagenic Growth for the turn.
And Angel's Grace will buy another turn because that keeps Alessandro at 1 here. And there's the Ad Nauseam.
And there's the Ad Nauseam. And Ad Nauseam for Alessandro, cracking that Lotus Bloom.
And now, because of that Unlife in play, Alessandro's life total can just go deeply negative. He just that's the I draw my whole deck motion.
Yeah, and he's about to show. Yep, and Ryan here gets to take a look at the whole deck, though deck lists are available to players here in the top 8, so no big surprises here.
And then although Ryan does get to see that Darknesses were in fact sideboarded in. And Lightning Storm plus, a sufficient amount of lands looks like it's going to force a game 3 here.
You're definitely right about that, though. Being able to take a look at the sideboard plan also affects how they might want to change the sideboard.
Yeah, I could see Ryan knowing about Darkness now. I mean, knowing that Alessandro's probably siding it anyway, that I don't think this was like shocking information, means that he might not go all in game 3 if he ends up in a situation where Darkness would be really effective.
And there you go. 3 Simian Spirit Guides, Lightning Storm. Oh, and there we see.
One more. Okay, one.
Yeah, he's saying just one more. You just need to show me one more land. And there you go. These players are going to force it into a game 3. Now the players are tied here in quarterfinals 1. And man, it looked like Phyrexian Unlife did so much work that game.
Yeah, it turned out Alessandro top deck the Ad Nauseam at turn 4. He strictly had to, but that Phyrexian Unlife would have bought him additional turn anyway, as well as comboing with the Ad Nauseam, of course, to win the game. The post game 2 handshake always a treat.
Well, we will bring you updates on what's going on over there. But for now, let's move back to James Wilkes versus Mattia Rizzi. This is once again Dredge versus Infect. And now that the players have moved post-board, Luis, any expectations for who's favored?
So taking a look at the sideboards here, it really comes down more to how many anti-dredge cards Infect has, and in this particular case, 3 copies of Ravenous Trap is significant. If Infect draws Ravenous Trap, it buys them at least 1 turn, maybe 2, in a matchup that's already a pretty close race. Spell Pierce can also do some work too, because Dredge really does require Faithless Looting or Cathartic Reunion to kick things off, and those get Spell Pierced in the early turns. Instantly, it gets around those. It's a non-creature. It's not, it's a creature, so it can't get Spell Pierced, but Spell Pierce is still a card. If it's in Infect's opening hand, can be very disruptive.
Italy here looking to run back, winning the World Magic Cup last year. Mattia Rizzi wasn't on the team last year, though. He is not... he has experience at the Pro Tour level, so does James. So these players are used to a little bit of pressure here.
Yeah, no. With Italy up a game in Lantern against Bant Eldrazi, game 3 against Blue-Red Kiln Fiend and Ad Nauseam, and then of course Dredge up a game here against Infect. Australia has a slight edge right now, but our match is still very much undecided.
Noble Hierarch coming down on turn 1 here for Mattia.
And the card that James really wants in his opening hand is Dark Blast. He's got 1 in the main deck, 1 in the sideboard, and that really would pressure Infect, but fortunately for James, he does not appear to have opened on a Dark Blast.
And James has to be somewhat happy to see this, right? Just the Noble Hierarch beatdown.
Yeah, this isn't a turn 2 Blighted Agent. I mean, Inkmoth Nexus is a threat, but it's a little mana intensive, and this hand is not quite as fast as some Infect hands can be.
So if you're James, what are you thinking now is in Mattia's hand if he just played Noble Hierarch, nothing on turn 2, and is just attacking with it now?
Some combination of Pump Spells and Spell Pierces would be what I would be suspicious of. If Mattia had any Glistener Elves or Blighted Agents, they would have been in play, or even another Noble. So it really has to be just lands and like Pump Spells, and Spell Pierce, one of the few non-creature or non-Pump Spell cards in the deck.
All right, so Collective Brutality, discarding Golgari Grave Troll. One is going to be trying to kill this Noble Hierarch.
And Mattia doesn't have a way to counter it, but he could use Mutagenic Growth to save the Noble Hierarch. The fact that Collective Brutality presumably is also taking an instant or sorcery from Mattia's hand is pretty unfortunate, because he has Become Immense in hand, and that's really what he was hoping to finish the game with on this Inkmoth Nexus in a turn or 2.
And here in the back you see Andrea Mengucci, who is coaching for the round. And tell me about the strategy of, Andrea's their team captain, the most experienced player also on their team. Tell me about the strategy of putting him as a coach here in the finals, or in the quarterfinals.
The main reason that you would do something like that is that Andrea can, he's got his rolling chair technology, and he can roll back and forth between the matches and kind of offer help to whichever match is in the hardest position. For the most part, I think that he's content to let the players play, especially Casamenti, for example. It has a lot of experience with Ad Nauseam, so Andrea's more there as like a sanity check, which is very valuable, because when you're just like, I can play this game and I don't need additional help, but then you come across a turn or a play that's very complicated. Having additional eyes on it is valuable.
So Mattia is choosing to save the Noble Hierarch with a Mutagenic Growth. The Collective Brutality is going to be able to address something here.
And Become Immense, certainly the most dangerous card in hand, especially if you were to make Mattia discard Might of Old Krosa. He'd have 3 cards in the graveyard. Winds of Teeth becomes a 4th card, and then very close to just dying to Become Immense.
Is that what you would take here then?
I think that's the call.
Yeah, and that is exactly what he's going to go for. A nice aside there with Collective Brutality is also being able to get that Golgari Grave Troll in the graveyard.
Oh wow. Mattia drew another Become Immense. So he's actually much happier that that Become Immense got discarded here, I think he's just going to be able to win the game right now. Might of Old Crosa Become Immense. So, I mean, Infect has some explosive draws, and the player's playing very fast here since when your opponent starts playing that fast, the writing's
you
on the
know
wall.
it's coming.
Oh, yeah.
There it is. Might of Old Crosa.
Good tap mana.
Yep. 2 more. Become Immense. Exile my graveyard. And boom.
That's 11, right?
That's just 12 poisoners right away.
Jeez, and these players are going to go to a game 3 here. Mattia pushes it into game 3, and that is exactly how Infect wins. I'm telling you, they always have it.
Yeah, Become Immense is just the top card of your library. Like
Even they are laughing. They're like, how did we... how did that happen?
We got Become Immense.
Yeah, we just got Become Immense.
Yeah, 3 Become Immense.
Moving back to Ryan Cubbett versus Alessandro Casamenti, and I'm also hearing that over at David Mines versus Alessandro Portaro, they have evened it out, and they're also going to game 3. So all of them battling to continue here in the top 8.
All right, so we have a trio of game 3s here. So it looks like it's going to be a close match regardless of how this ends up.
Ryan kicking things off here exactly how he wants. Turn 1, Monastery Swift Spear. Alessandro with the Temple of Deceit here gets to scry. And this seems like exactly the kind of start both players want, right?
Lotus Bloom is crucial. Wait, is that a Team or Battle Rage in hand? Let's take a look here and see if we can figure out, because I see 3 mutagenic growth, so that...
Oh, geez.
Wait. Oh, that's a Manamorphose.
No, it is. It was so close. It could maybe find one.
So let's see. If Ryan, right as it stands, Ryan can play 5 spells. Swift Spear is a 6. The 3 mutagenic growth makes it an 11. Bolt makes it 14. Team or Battle Rage, way more than lethal here. So if Manamorphose finds Team or Battle Rage, we have a turn 2 kill. If it finds a Lightning Bolt, we have, 18 damage on turn 2?
It was a Pyromancer. It was red. It almost looked like it might be.
But Young Pyromancer is actually
It's
great.
also very good here.
Because you can attack triple mutagenic growth, make 3 tokens, and potentially set up a turn 3 kill here.
Oh yeah, Ryan's just going off. Mutagenic growth number 1.
This turn is amazing.
Mutagenic growth number 2. Trigger the Swift Spear, get another token. Probably coming in again once more. There's your Young Pyromancer.
So
brings a 1/1 red elemental with every instant sorcerer. And Mutagenic growth number 3. And another elemental. And another prowess trigger on the Swift Spear.
So Swift Spear's attacking for 11 here. This is going to drop Alessandro to 8 and leave Ryan with 6 power plus a lightning bolt in hand. So it's threatening a turn 3 kill here.
I'm not going to lie. This has been one of my favorite decks to watch, period. It's so explosive and we see so many cool things from it.
Yeah, the blue-red Kiln Fiend deck is awesome.
Pentad Prism is a draw for Alessandro. And if you're Alessandro now, and given what just happened on turn 2, what do you try to do here?
It's really tough because Alessandro can't win until that Lotus Bloom comes into play, and he's actually missing the Angel's Grace part of the combo. So he's going to buy himself a turn here by duressing Lightning Bolt, but he's not necessarily because now Ryan needs a spell to win the game here. But Alessandro's still not winning next turn.
Oh my gosh, he drew a lightning bolt. And there you see the handshake, and the first match here in the quarterfinals goes to Australia. Big smiles there from the team. There you see. And now they get to help each other out. The look on his face.
Yeah.
You just never, what can you do when that happens to you? You were never going to beat that.
No, turn 3, especially with the ad nauseam deck being on the draw, that is... That's going to be tough for Ad Nauseam to beat.
All right, we're going to be moving into David Mines versus Alessandro Portaro, and Lantern players around the world rejoice as they get to see Lantern in the top 8 here at the World Magic Cup. We're going to be seeing Bant Eldrazi versus Lantern Control, and these players are post-board. This is game 3. Luis, what do you think happens here?
Well, game 1 is the toughest game for Bant Eldrazi because it does not have any way to deal with Ensnaring Bridge. Post-board games, the games 2 and 3, are a lot more manageable because of cards like, as you can see in hand right now, Engineered Explosives, Stony Silence, negate. These Stubborn Denial. These are all very powerful cards against the Lantern strategy.
How much more interactive do these matchups get post board, specifically for Bant Eldrazi?
Bant basically gets to side out its Path to Exile and some of its less relevant other cards, like maybe Spellskite or potentially like some things like Dismember is not, doesn't have any targets, and gets to board in ways to deal with Ensnaring Bridge, Lantern, and Ghoul Caller's Bell. So it gets a lot more interactive for Bant Eldrazi, but it's the fact that Ensnaring Bridge is tough to beat and the Lantern deck has access to Inventor Sphere and Academy Runes makes it very difficult for Bant to feel very happy about this matchup, even if it does now have answers.
And we keep seeing this so far in the quarterfinals. Duress or Thoughtseize or Inquisition, one of your cards, immediately top it. So that just happened with David. That Inquisition took away that Ancient Stirrings, but he just drew another one.
Yeah, we actually saw that literally 3 times in a row. The exact card that got discarded got drawn. And that just goes back to the old saying, I don't know how old it is, but we say it all the time. Discard doesn't have protection from nonsense.
Yep.
You can...
It is very true. That's why it's so tilting sometimes to play with discard, because you just immediately saw that. You see just how lucky your opponents got.
Yeah, both teams are being the recipients of this luck. I mean, Matea drawing Become Immense to even up the score for Italy, and then, of course, the Blue-Red Kiln Fiend deck finding Lightning Bolt in order to put Australia on the map.
All right, so Pithing Needle coming down for Alessandro, and we'll get a word on what that's naming. But a Lantern of Insight also makes an appearance here. And now both players are going to play with the top card of their library revealed. We see Noble Hierarch and then... Okay, Pithing Needle is on Engineered Explosives.
That would have been my guess. Though I cleverly timed it, so I got confirmation first.
It was smart.
It's like way easier to guess when you know the answers.
Eldrazi Displacer making an appearance for David. And a relatively slow start here for Bant. None of Eldrazi Temples or ways to power out these Eldrazi quickly. And Ensnaring Bridge makes an appearance.
Well, here we have it. This is what Lantern needs to do. It's got Ensnaring Bridge, it's got Lantern, it's missing Ghoul Caller's Bell or Codex Shredder. But, I mean, taking a look at what David Mines has right now, he's got a negate, so he can set up a turn where he can just counter if Alessandro goes for one of those cards, like Bell or Codex Shredder. But none of David's creatures can attack except Noble Hierarch, and Spellskite can just block that. Though Eldrazi Displacer can start... I guess David's best way to move forward could be Eldrazi Displacer, your Spellskite each turn, and then attack with Noble Hierarch for 1. That's not the most exciting turn, but it is making a little bit of progress. Other than that, though, none of David's cards do much. Drowner of Hope, Matter Reshaper, these aren't cards that really affect the game when there's an Ensnaring Bridge just sitting in play, preventing everything from attacking.
And the reason you say that is because Noble Hierarch is small enough to attack, but actually get a little bit of power thanks to the Exalted trigger.
Right. The way the timing works out is favorable for Noble Hierarch. It attacks at 0 power because Bridge can't stop 0 power creatures from attacking, and then Exalted will trigger and make it a 1/2.
Yep, and that is exactly what we're seeing here. That the Displacer displacing that Spellskite. That Noble Hierarch getting in there for 1 damage, dropping Alessandro down to 19. I guess then the question becomes how many Spellskites can he present, / how many times can they blinked? This is a very slow clock.
Yeah, this clock is not likely to win the game for David, but because Lantern cuts both ways. Having that Lantern of Insight in play means that David knows when he needs to leave up Negate or not. So you saw him tap out of Negate last turn. He's going to tap out this turn most likely too, because he knows that Alessandro does not have a way to stop it.
Second Noble Hierarch making an appearance, and now these Noble Hierarchs are going to start attacking for a little bit more damage.
Ooh, that's a great card to see on top of Alessandro's deck.
Inventor Sphere.
Yeah, one of the big new additions from Kaladesh, because it gains a life per turn, which will blunt the amount of damage Alessandro's taking. But more importantly, Alessandro can sacrifice it to find an answer to these Noble Hierarchs, or just find a Codex Shredder to start getting things going. Alessandro does know about the negate. So both players are aware that this negate's sitting in hand and will counter one of the potential threats from Alessandro, but you still have to draw past it. Alessandro doesn't have an option other than that.
Right. And see an untap from Alessandro. Draw that Inventor's Fair. There's an Abrupt Decay on top of his deck.
Abrupt Decay helps here because it can kill the Eldrazi Displacer, which leaves the Spellskite to block Noble Hierarch each turn. Could also potentially kill a Noble, but that seems less appealing than just killing the Displacer.
Well, David does have access to a second Displacer now as he draws it. You have a Maya Coast on top.
And of course, Alessandro, being aware of that also, that makes it less enticing to kill Displacer too. So that Abrupt Decay, not really what Alessandro is happy about. And you saw that Lantern did slide in Nature's Claim there, and that's just going to sit in Alessandro's hand. And part of the unfortunate thing is, even though it does kill Stony Silence and Engineered Explosives, a good sideboard card, because David knows about it, he can just wait and wait and wait, and at some point Alessandro might have to play it just to get a card out of his hand for Ensnaring Bridge.
So at this point, if you're David, what are your avenues to victory? We see this slow, grindy path of Noble Hierarch, but what else are you thinking about in order to try to set up a win here?
Ways to kill Ensnaring Bridge. So once Engineered Explosives gets hit by Needle, I don't actually think that David has a way to kill Ensnaring Bridge. So you get to that point, you're like, okay, I no longer can remove this bridge. My win condition has to be Noble Hierarch.
Mm-hmm.
You need to prevent Alessandro from assembling the Lantern Lock. Stony Silence actually is very, very good at that. And you will then have to save your negate for Nature's Claim. But Alessandro also has this Abrupt Decay. So basically, David has to win with Nobles and has to just hope to draw enough disruption to keep Alessandro from comboing off and or finding additional answers.
Alessandro there, Abrupt Decaying that Noble Hierarch.
Yeah, and David has Eldrazi Displacer mana up, so if he wanted to, he could displace his Noble. Critically, Alessandro's looking at Surgical Extraction on top of his deck. He could exile Noble Hierarchs to make it so David ends up without any more Nobles besides the one he has in play.
And the fact that you mentioned that, Luis, we're getting confirmation that he did actually do that in Game 1. Get rid of all the Noble Hierarchs.
Noble Hierarch's not like the most common target for Surgical Extraction, but
you gotta do what you gotta do.
Yeah, and Lantern does play the card because it lets you really just sculpt your game plan and slowly remove your opponent's outs, which is probably why most people think the deck is very fun to play against.
Is that what? Common knowledge?
Yes.
Commonly accepted by everybody?
Because with this Inventor's Fair gaining 1 a turn, and with the first Noble getting decayed and the second, and then the further Nobles potentially getting extracted, it's actually really hard for David to win this game. What he can do, one way to set up a win is he can continue using Displacer on Drowner of Hope, build up an army of Eldrazi Scions, so he ends up with 20 Eldrazi Scions in play. And then if he finds Thought-Knot Seer, blink his own Thought-Knot Seer with Displacer, stack it such that Alessandro ends up with 1 card in his hand at the end of it. And because of Lantern, you can make sure you do it on a turn where that card is not an instant. And then you get to attack with a bunch of 1-power Scions and finish the game. But that is many turns in the future, and Alessandro does have ways around that.
David Mines here considering his options. He's a team captain for Australia. And this is actually his first team event.
Oh, wow.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the things you see about the World Magic Cup is you see a lot of the team captains repeat with the other teammates, switching more often. We saw that with Andrea Mengucci, being the team captain of Italy 2 years in a row. And part of it is that the person who wins the most pro points in a country, especially if they do well, they end up being able to become the captain.
And here we see Surgical Extraction targeting those Noble Hierarchs. And David Mines, what are you going to do in the face of that? This is what it's like to play against Lantern Control, right? It's very much like a boa constrictor. It just starts oppressing you from all these different angles.
And we've discussed this before, but you end up in situations like this where you can't concede. David Mines has a chance to win this game. He's on the board here. In fact, he's got a path to victory with this Displacer eventually, but it is not a game he is going to win easily. And despite Lantern, getting the lock going, it's going to be a long time to try to figure out the outcome of the game, and you have to try and play through it.
So he is going to fire off that negate there to prevent the Hierarchs from getting extracted. And now Alessandro claiming his own Mox Opal, dropping the cards in hand to 0, but also getting some life there too.
And David was able to force the use of that Nature's Claim by just waiting, because he knew Alessandro would eventually have to cast it because of Ensnaring Bridge.
Gaining for life there, pretty brutal though. Think of how much work those Noble Hierarchs had to put in before they could do that.
Now that negate is gone, Alessandro has a lot more incentive to use that Inventor Sphere. The one life a turn is crucial, but I think that they might be checking to see if their Crucible of Worlds is still in the deck, because Crucible would be a pretty natural target here.
Yeah, can you explain what the Lantern lock with Inventor Sphere looks like?
If you go get Crucible of Worlds with Inventor Sphere, you can then replay Inventor Sphere every turn and get a new artifact every turn. Though selecting Pithing Needle might mean that, and this is actually where it's really powerful. We got word that the team captains and the players not playing matches can actually look at deck lists in between or during games.
Yeah, the players cannot, but the team captains can.
Right. So Andrea can look at the deck list and be like, all right, Explosives is needled. He can't kill Ensnaring Bridge. If I needle Displacer, at that point, there
is no out.
Yeah, how can David win this game? He can't displace the Spellskite. He can't use the Displacer Thought Knot Seer trick to go off. Eventually, I'll find the Lantern lock. I think Lantern might have stripped all the outs away from the Eldrazi deck here.
That thoughts he's taking down that Eldrazi Sky Spawner. Is Sky Spawner even concerning here? Was there a benefit maybe taking the Displacer, or maybe just an eventual needle is gonna lock it down?
Yeah, it looks like they're all about the same, and it looks like that needle did in fact name it Eldrazi Displacer. So now Australia is playing out when looking at the cards left in their deck, I don't see how Australia wins this game unless there's a very odd combination of cards that ends up happening here.
Yeah, Thought Knot Seer making an appearance. Alessandro has no cards in hand. And another 3 for that Displacer.
And it's, I guess, technically possible that like a combination of Stony Silence plus Alessandro drawing maybe cards he can't cast, but he can cast every card in his deck, even if it's not great. Like even if it's Nature's claiming his own cards, he can still play all those cards.
And it looks like Alessandro's found his first mill artifact here. It's a Codex Shredder. A forest for David Mines. A Drowner of Hope on top, and not a lot of hope left though.
No, the hope has been sufficiently drowned here. I think. Again, this is the top 8. You're playing for your country. You're going to play out this game until you're dead, and make sure that you're not missing something. Your opponents might miss something, but I don't really see a path to victory against this Lantern deck that has, slowly but surely like found lock piece after lock piece using needles and extractions and bridges to just put Eldrazi in a spot where they can't actually win the game.
Well, part of the thing is sometimes when you're playing against Lantern Control, you're hoping that they run out of mill effects and you just draw 5. 5 amazing cards off the top, and one of them is a very impactful spell. The problem here seems to be that the Bant Eldrazi deck just has no answers or a way to finish the game.
Yeah, there's, when you say like, yeah, if you draw 5 impactful spells in a row, you might get out of it, and that is true. That is your hope against this deck. What if your deck has no impactful spells left?
Yes.
That makes it difficult to get to 5, I think.
Ancient Strings finds a Spellskite for Alessandro.
Oh, I see one out.
Okay.
There's 1 Birds of Paradise in Australia's deck.
Okay.
If they draw Birds of Paradise, they can attack over the Spellskites for 1 point of damage to turn off Noble Hierarch.
Of a Noble Hierarch.
That's a very thin margin of victory. If Alessandro found an Inventor's Fair, he'd be able to eventually win, but he had to use his to get the needle. Still, I don't think even if David had a bird in play, I don't think he would win here, because Alessandro would be able to use Codex Shredder and find an Inventor's Fair or an answer to the bird. If if Alessandro wants to prevent David from drawing Bird, he also has that ability with those Codex Shredders.
Another engineered explosives. Once again, this card doesn't do very much here. We're going to see a pass Alessandro milling the Noble Hierarch, milling the Temple. And you can even see here with the Lantern Control player, he is just straight up milling. You know, a lot of times Lantern Control players will be careful about what they're letting them mill, but he's just not really worried about anything.
Yeah, I actually very much appreciate Italy's strategy this game, where in order to finish the game, Alessandro is just aggressively milling David, even though he could technically let David draw useless Eldrazi displacers. He just wants to get this game over with, which I can certainly sympathize, especially since I do think that with Ghoul Color's Bell, 2 Codex Shredders, another Codex Shredder on top, it's going to be nigh impossible for David to draw anything relevant, because as far as we can tell, he's got 1 relevant card left in his deck. Stony Silence also is relevant insofar as it deals with the lock, but doesn't actually win David the game.
Yeah, and Alessandro continues to find more Codex Shredders. 3 Codex Shredders, that Ghoul Color spell, and the milling is happening here. Yep, another Thought Not Seer and a pass back. Ghoul Color's Bell. Drowner of Hope, you're gone. Thought Not Seer, you're also gone. Oh, and there's a Stony Silence.
I suspect David will not be drawing that Stony Silence.
Yeah, you mean sure.
Yep, and there it goes.
And so this is actually a relatively fast kill as far as Lantern goes. When you're milling your opponent 4 cards a turn and they're drawing 1 card a turn, it doesn't actually last that many turns before it ends.
There's a Birds of Paradise, but it's also gone.
No birds this time.
Play this. Yes. This one is first.
Ancient Strings. Finds that Inventor's Fair. Another mill. Artifact on top of the deck, and there we see the deck is starting to become quite thin from this angle. Another Eldrazi Sky Spawner. We're getting word that there's probably about 18 cards or so left in the deck.
Yeah, and that's actually only like 3 turns at this rate. So, yeah, once Lantern's in full on, mill you for 5 a turn mode, like you'd really don't have hope.
Yep, and there you see the handshake, and Australia was also up a match, so this is gonna take it down for Australia. They defeat last year's champions.
We're going to game 3.
Oh, we have game 3 over here.
Yes, so Italy is keeping themselves alive here, but it's going to come down to Dredge against Infect in game 3. Matteo Rizzi going to have to top deck another Become Immense potentially here, since he kind of stole the last game we saw.
And both players have mulligan to 6.
Which I think is generally better for Dredge. Dredge doesn't care too much about cards in hand, and it looks like they're actually scrying now.
Yeah, they left some dice on top of their deck there to make sure they remember to scry there. Ooh, and Mattia bottomed that one. It looks like James bottomed as well. It's Lineone making an appearance for James. We'll see if he has a big dredger that he can discard with it. It looks like he might not. Alright, Gitaxian Probe to kick things off. He can discard the Conflagrate, but he does not have a way to get the engine started with Dredge.
Yeah, this looks like a ideal hand minus a Dredger, which on 6 with a Scry, it's a hand you're going to want to keep, especially since Conflagrate is really important against Infect, but this is not a hand you're excited about, and I think Matea is not too unhappy to see that, especially since Inkmoth Nexus kind of gets around Conflagrate just by virtue of it never being a creature on the opponent's turn.
And here Australia considering what they want to do to kick things off, but this is difficult. The Dredge deck, when it doesn't find one of its first dredgers or one of the big dredgers and gets it in the graveyard at the start, it's very difficult for them to get anything going. You're attacking with a 1/1.
Yeah, the deck looks quite anemic actually when it doesn't have any dredging going on. It's got 2 1-mana 1/1s in play. Its hand is an uncastable Narcomoeba, a Conflagrate that doesn't do anything. Dredge did draw a Collective Brutality, which I assume that Australia wants to save that in order to cast it for 2 modes, killing whatever Mattea plays first, and then also targeting his hand.
If you're Mattea, are you feeling good about the match right here? Just based on what's happened on the first 2 turns?
Well, taking a look at Mattea's hand, he's got a Ravenous Trap, which certainly is one of the cards you want to see against Dredge, but it's actually kind of funny that the Dredge start is so slow that you haven't really come close to wanting to use Ravenous Trap. But this hand has all the tools that Infect needs to take the match here. It's got Become Immense as a pump spell, Spell Pierce as a bit of disruption, Inkmoth Nexus as a way to get around Conflagrate, and Glistener Elf plus Blighted Agent, so an actual couple creatures to play. And remember that the Infect deck did use Gitaxian Probe, so they're aware of the Conflagrate lurking in Dredge's hand. I like Italy's spot here. The fact that Dredge isn't doing anything, and even if they do draw a Dredger, the Ravenous Trap eliminates the first instance of that pretty much. Means that Italy has time and has a combination of cards which I think will help. They're now deciding whether they want to play Glistener Elf and leave Spell Pierce up or play Blighted Agent. If they were going to not play anything, they would have likely played it. Or if they were going to play Blighted Agent, they would have likely played Inkmoth Nexus to go along with it.
All right, so Dark Blast there for James. That's the first Dredger available to him.
And Dark Blast is a really good draw because Dark Blast has, not only is it a Dredger, but it also gives Dredge the disruption it's looking for. So that's actually one of the better cards that Dredge could have found on the top of their deck here. Australia has got to be happy about that.
When do you want to fire off this Dark Blast?
So what they're deciding now is how to manage Insolent Neonates. They could cast Dark Blast, then sack Neonate. They could also kick things off with Collective Brutality here.
That is exactly what they're going to do. Collective Brutality, attempting to kill this Glistener Elf, discarding the Dark Blast, and now it's in the graveyard, so it will be able to be dredged soon. Yep, and Mattea firing off this Spell Pierce, preventing this from happening. This Glistener Elf gets to see another day.
It'll be interesting to see when Insolent Neonate gets sacrificed, because it's possible that Mattea is going to be able to use Ravenous Trap to exile that Dark Blast, but Ravenous Trap's alternate cast ability is only if they have 3 or more cards put in their graveyard, so he can't actually fire it off right now. And with Insolent Neonate in play, James can respond by dredging Dark Blast by sacking Neonate. So it's going to be a kind of interesting dance to see when Ravenous Trap gets used and to what effect.
How much do you think James and Team Australia are playing with Ravenous Trap in mind right now?
Because they have deck lists, because they know sideboards, they know Ravenous Traps are in the deck, they're going to keep it in mind. I don't know how much they can afford to really play around it. I think they're just going to mostly have to play normal, but it could be that they want to save an Insolent Neonate to have an instant speed dredge option if a Ravenous Trap gets cast.
How many Ravenous Traps do they play?
The Infect deck was playing 3 Ravenous Traps. So 3 is a high enough number that you do want to kind of consistently want to play around it.
Oh wow, so Glistener Elf attacks into that Insolent Neonate and it's just a trade.
Yeah, it's a kind of funny interaction where Infect has pump spells, but if they play one, then Dredge just gets to sacrifice the Neonate. So if both players pass, then the creatures do, well exactly what they did.
A Blighted Agent is the follow-up here for Mattea, and then we see the Dark Blast being dredged. A Mountain. Oh, there's a Grave Troll and a Bloodghast. Is this a good enough time to fire off that Ravenous Trap?
At this point, it would be tempting to do so. You can respond to a Bloodghast trigger, for example, if Australia does play a land. Though, if they play, looks like they don't actually have fetch lands in their deck. So you don't have to worry about them playing a fetch land, triggering Bloodghast, then sacrificing the fetch land. But one reason not to fire off the Ravenous Trap right now is there's nothing happening with the graveyard. You can do it like maybe end of turn, but you don't need to do it this instant. However, if James were to like main phase cast Dark Blast on Blighted Agent, then you would have a lot more incentive because then you might want to try to exile the Dark Blast. They could sack Nina in response to get it back, but you would at least be costing them some amount of time in dredgers.
And that is what is happening here. Dark Blast targeting that Blighted Agent takes it down. Let's see if Italy wants to fire off that Ravenous Trap.
And one of the disadvantages of having your whole team at your shoulder here is if they're discussing this and waiting.
How much of a... here's the question. How much of an advantage is it to have 3 people playing with you? How much of a disadvantage is it?
It's an advantage because you're less likely to make like obvious I blocked your 3/3 with my 2/2 type mistakes. It can be a disadvantage because you give away a lot of information. When your team is like talking and thinking at the end of the opponent's turn, there's just almost no cards in your deck that would do anything, then the other team's going to narrow it down to something like Ravenous Trap. On the other hand, having access to teammates to trying to figure out lines of play is very valuable. So on balance, I think it's an advantage, but there are definitely drawbacks.
Also, there's an element of bluffing, though. We've seen teams do that, right? It looks like they're discussing like there's a card in hand, maybe there really isn't, but you're kind of trying to sell it. So you never know.
Yeah, like imagine that same situation happened where Team Italy's like trying to figure out what to do at the end of the Australia's turn, and they didn't have Ravenous Trap. They would be selling that they did pretty hard by like having this discussion at that time.
All right, so Inkmoth Nexus activating the other Inkmoth Nexus, and the Noble Hierarch also giving a +1/+1 to that Inkmoth Nexus for now. See if there's anything James wants to say about that.
So one of the few things that James could do here is he could dredge Grave Troll and maybe hit Ancient Grudge, and that would give him an answer to the attacking Nexus.
He doesn't. He's discarding Conflagrate. Now he's gonna dredge that Grave Troll. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
Oh, we could also hit Narcomoeba.
Yeah, Narcomoeba.
In order to potentially block, but...
Oh, and there you see they're firing off the Ravenous Trap, and there goes the whole graveyard away. How bad is this for Dredge?
Yeah, that was really devastating for Dredge. I think that was very well timed by Team Italy. They just waited till the big Dredger hit and till the second Neonate was gone, because look at James's hand now. He's got a Narcomoeba, and he's got a Golgari Grave Troll. He's got no way to get them into the graveyard, and...
Oh, geez, and the Ravenous Trap was enough for that Become Immense.
So now he's taking 8 poison, so he's just dead next turn and has no cards that do anything. I'm going to say that's not a good place to be.
And here we're going to see a Numtat, and the players are playing so fast now because they can see it's right there.
And Italy deciding whether to attack with 1 Nexus with Exalted or just 2 Nexus.
So they're animating 2 Nexus, and there you see the handshake, and Italy continues on, and they can potentially run it back from last year.
Wow. Yeah, Italy definitely very pleased to advance here. Really tight set of matches. Italy was down a game in the A and C seats. Managed to take it with Lantern control over Bant Eldrazi, then Infect over Dredge. That top deck becomes in game 2, forcing a game 3, and Matteo Rizzi pretty happy with this turn of events.
Yeah, how important do you think was that Ravenous Trap to the whole game? It seems like it really was the backbreaking thing, right?
Even if Matteo didn't have that Become Immense to finish the game very quickly, that Ravenous Trap made it so that Dredge wasn't doing anything. It just removed Australia's real hopes of victory at this point.
It would be pretty cool to see him run it back potentially. How did that matchup play out compared to what you expected?
I think that Dredge Infect is the closest match of the 3, and it really comes down to how many Dark Blast, Ancient Grudges, Conflagrates Dredge can get going. But Ravenous Trap is just such an effective card. One of the drawbacks of having a deck as explosive and linear and powerful as Dredge is that your opponents have cards like Ravenous Trap. It feels very unfair. You're like, you have a 0-mana card that just kills all my cards, and that's what happened.
We saw a Kiln Fiend deck yesterday. I think it was the last match of the Swiss where multiple Ravenous Traps were drawn, and it was a multitude of Ravenous Traps that set Dredge far behind enough that it was. I believe this was Panama. Yeah.
And they were just, with with all this power from Dredge comes this vulnerability to cards like Ravenous Trap, and we've seen this happen multiple times.
Well, that's going to do it here for quarterfinal 1 from the World Magic Cup, but we have so much magic waiting for you today. Don't go anywhere. We'll be back right after these messages.
Hello everyone, welcome back to the news desk. Quarterfinal 1 is done and dusted. Brian David Marshall, last year Italy were immense. Throughout this weekend they've been immense. They didn't need to become immense, but they did need become immense.
They did need to become immense. They also needed Ravenous Trap, a card I hate, with a burning, seething, and eternal passion. I love the graveyard. And Ravenous Trap was just a great card there for Team Italy, and really well played. I mean, so much patience on that card. There were a couple times earlier in the match where he could have deployed it or fired it off, but really waited to the moment to get maximum value out of it, and really just left Australia without any options.
Yeah, Simon, how did you feel the match went?
It was the sideboard cards ultimately, because Infect, as we discussed before, has some trouble getting through, and Dredge is really fast if it gets a good draw. But leaving your opponent with 2 lands, a Golgari Graveton and now Krimiva in hand, and no graveyard, you just win from there with any deck.
Right. Well, why don't we take a look at our bracket here at the World Magic Cup. Quarterfinal 1 is done and dusted, and we began with Australia against Italy, the 4 seed v the 5 seed, and it is Italy that advanced to the semi-finals. They will play the winner of our last quarterfinal, which later on today will be Belgium against Panama. But we're going to turn our attention here at the WMC to the bottom half of the bracket, and that means it's time to take a look at Greece against Ukraine. That is our second set of quarterfinal action. Why don't we take a look at the Greek national team here in 2016. They are captained by Bill Chronopoulos. Unfinished business for him. 2014, he made it all the way to the final. Panagiotis Papadopoulos is also back again in his third WMC. Newcomers Petros Tsiodis and Nikolaos Kaponis. And then on the other side of the table from them, it's Ukraine. So let's take a look. Sergei Suchalski is the captain, 3 Grand Prix top 8s for him. You've got Bogdan Soroshinsky, Yuri Babic, and Artem Fedorchenko, the Merfolk player, there for them. So that's the two teams, but this is all about matchup. So let's bring you the three matches that are going to determine the outcome of this. Seat A for Greece is Bill Chronopoulos with Dredge against Sergei Suchalski, so it's the two team captains. Dredge against Titan Breach. Simon, your thoughts on the Dredge against Titan Breach matchup?
Titan Breach is more explosive, usually faster, and I think it's heavily favored against Dredge. Even though Dredge is a very scary deck, Titan Breach is even more scary.
Well, if that's true, that would be a one-up to Ukraine. Let's take a look at the middle seat then. So this is going to be Petros Siotis with Abzan up against Bant Eldrazi. That's Yuri Babic, a former two-time national champion for Ukraine. So Bant Eldrazi, Abzan, what do you reckon, Simon?
It's not too far off from 50-50, but I think Bant Eldrazi is a little favored. If we see a lot of Eldrazi temple draws, then I would say that is even more clear.
I would assume if the game goes long, very long as well, it tilts more in Bant Eldrazi's favor in terms of being able to control the board with displacers.
Yeah, but also it's possible that Bant Eldrazi just has these really unfair turn 3 Thought Knot Seer, turn 4 Reality Smasher draws. So it can go both ways.
All right, let's take a look at Seat C for you. This is Panagiotis Papadopoulos for Greece with Infect against Artem Fedorchenko with Merfolk. He not only won the modern WMCQ with Merfolk, he made the final of one of the other WMCQs with Merfolk. He really knows his fish, that is for sure. So Infect against Merfolk, Simon.
Infect against Merfolk is super aggressive, of course. One player trying to win with poison damage, the other one with regular damage. The Merfolk creatures cannot be underestimated, but ultimately it's going to depend on how interactive these games are. Are there going to be a lot of vapor snags and dismembers, or is it just a straight up race? If it's a race, Infect will win. If it's more interactive, I would say Merfolk is favored.
Right, so BDM, just to clarify for viewers at home, because Merfolk isn't something we've seen on camera this weekend, we want to see the Merfolk not going past Infect, but actually we want engagement with it.
Or engagement with it, or just island walking across it with spreading seas.
Yep, okay. So let's get into the actual decks that these six players are going to bring us. We'll start with Bill Chronopoulos in Seat A with Dredge, the captain for Greece. Simon, Dredge, what's it doing?
It's filling its graveyard with Dredge cards, then it tries to cast one of the many card draw spells, Faithless Looting or Cathartic Reunion, and then Narcomuras start coming back, Bloodcast start coming back, and Priced Amalgams follow. So you get this really beautiful board of a bunch of colorful monsters.
Right. But in terms of the zone that we're focusing on through the course of the game, it is a graveyard-centered deck.
Yes, you can often see 15, 20 cards in the Dredge player's graveyard, and that's where they take most of their resources from.
All right, well, Sergei Suchalski is his opponent, and he is playing Titan Breach in Seat A. Let's take a look at that. BDM, Titan Breach. We see Chandra Torch of Defiance in this one, so great to see some Kaladesh impacting in Modern.
Yeah, absolutely. Titan Breach is all about, obviously, getting your. I'm looking for it here, and I'm not seeing it on the list.
No, this is not a Titan Breach.
This is not a Titan. Yeah, okay, good. I was like, sorry, I'm looking at the graphic, and I was having a moment of panic.
Right.
I'm like, there should be a Primeval Titan on here somewhere.
This is a Blue Moon.
Yes, this is Blue Moon.
Okay, apologies for that. We've got the wrong list there.
Anyway, it's a deck that's looking to get Primeval Titan into play. It's looking to bring it in through the breach, as it were, and ultimately Valakut and Mountain out their opponent.
Often winning the game on the spot, because 6 damage from Titan and 2 triggers that get a bunch of Mountains and Valakuts is often just lethal.
I'm curious to see if Gnaw to the Bone out of the sideboard from Bill Chronopoulos is a game breaker here.
Well, we could well find out, because it is time for our second set of quarterfinals. Down on the floor, Greece and Ukraine are ready to do battle. Let's hand you down to the commentary booth once again.